And Michael D. Shaw is my guest as I persevere through some technical matters. Mike, how are you?
Just great.
You know, I want to start out by talking about the No Kings event.
Oh boy.
Um, I don't know if you saw any of this. There's this psychologist, Jonathan Alpert. He's been on Fox News. He's been out there. He has some interesting observations. Oops, I'm getting some weird thing here. Get rid of that. Um, has some interesting observations with regard to what he calls he says it's not so much a protest, it's more of a dopamine fix. And that the people that are out there, and the demographic is clear, 80 plus, mostly white women, suburban, well to do, educated, very few minorities, very few young people, very few
Well,
Hispanic.
I object to the word educated, but go ahead. They probably went
Okay,
to
objection well noted. The but he says that it's a he does refer to it as a deranged situation where you have this it's almost a religion for them, that they've
yeah.
replaced faith and they've replaced belief in God with this devout belief in hatred for Trump. My own mother, God bless her, I'm not criticizing, but she's lives in a assisted living facility. She kind of fits the profile of this demographic, and she called me up all excited, like I hadn't heard of that pumped up in a long time. That her group had a No Kings meeting that morning, and
Oh
someone
boy.
broke out a guitar, and they were like, "I'm like, what did they sing Puff the Magic Dragon? I mean, what is it like? Peter, Paul, and Mary."
Michael rode the motor show.
Exactly, and they're all cranked up. And this is so exciting, and I'm like, is there any unified message to it other than Orange Man bad? They can't think of any. It's this adrenaline rush. It is it's sort of like need to medicate themselves. Is how Jonathan Alpert describes it. The therapist, the psychologist, and it's really come down to like a mental and, quite frankly, a spiritual sickness that none of them can articulate. There was some good street reporters going out there with microphones interviewing people. What's your problem? What do you mean dictator? Can you give me an example? And meanwhile, they're flying flags for the Ayatollahs and the Hamas and Cuba, and you get the well-financed radicals groups are all part of it, of course, and they're engaging in violence in Los Angeles, where there's somebody spray painted on a federal building, "Kill ICE uh,
Well,
agents."
there were dozens of arrests in L.A.
Yeah,
and that was covered by the L.A. Times. I think the L.A. Times was even sick of it. On the one hand, they were saying, well, there were millions of people throughout the country, but it's stupid. And then there was a counter posting on X, which frankly was too long, but it was an example of how stupid this is. And they started out with Chucky Schumer has been in government for 46 years.
yeah.
All right. And all these other clowns that have been around forever. The fact that Kamala Harris was thrust on the presidential campaign with no input from anybody.
Right.
I mean, that would seem to be a King thing. And she lost, of course, but it's completely irrational and stupid. And in the place close to where I live, where these, such as they are, demonstrations are headquartered, there were maybe a couple of people there.
Oh, I know. Well, the numbers went way down. I mean, the thing was a complete flop. And I believe there was a protest in Washington, D.C. that was called the No Kings, but it actually was a pro-Trump protest. And you had people, Iranians, who are glad that President Trump is stepping up and trying to overthrow that miserable, oppressive regime that basically has killed 40,000 people who are protesting a real dictatorship earlier this year. And I think that the LA Police Department, the LAPD, and even the Portland, Oregon police, what's left of them, they've stepped up and they've cracked down on it, and they're not putting up with any nonsense. And that has nothing to do with the federal government. That's local police, and they're pretty sick of it. And but the majority of the people are not these radicals. They're people like my dear mother. Buses showed up at nursing homes, and people went down and had a great old hoot. My mother referred to it as a hoot nanny. I'm like, yes,
Hoot nanny, right.
Hoot nanny. I haven't heard that term since the early '60s. It's like a revival session.
Well, Joe Baez and Judy Henske.
Exactly, and they got Joan Baez at the Passim Coffee House in Boston. Once again, I mean, I remember as a kid going there and seeing that. But this is like old. This is like the last gasp of a. I mean, with due respect to them, a dying out regime. I mean, these people are in their 80s plus, and it's irrational. I mean, I saw one guy in Brookline with a sign, very well, well printed. It looks like some company put it together, to stop dictatorship. The thing they don't realize is that their entire edifice is so obviously untrue that it's not going anywhere, because obviously President Trump is not a dictator. I have to remind him he was elected with a majority of the popular vote, I may add, and the Electoral College. A dictator is not elected, and that what he's doing in office is fulfilling the mandate that he ran on. Like, for example, upholding the laws of the land with regard to illegal aliens. That's not dictatorship. That's called democracy. They like to crow about democracy. Well, what could be more democratic than electing a public official who runs on a platform, and then he fulfills that platform? That's what's going on. And if they don't like it, let them run a candidate who stands for open borders and all the other things they want, sex change for children, whatever other agendas they are pushing.
They did run a candidate like that, and she lost.
And lost. So let them make the case then that this is a virtuous idea. Maybe they can convince the American people that swinging open the national border is virtuous. I don't know. But that's what a democracy does, a republic, I should note, that is based on democratic principles. That's what it does. You have candidates who run to represent the interests of people who elect them and take specific positions. And then when they're elected, if they actually fulfill it, which often they don't, I'm thinking of, for example, in Virginia, Spanberger, the radical left governor. But Trump, in his case, he's trying to do it. He's trying to carry out the very positions that he ran on. They are entirely legal. He's basically doing nothing more than trying to enact the laws of the land. And if they don't like them, change them. But that's what he's doing, and that's what he's elected to do. They just don't get that.
Were you amused by the fact that there was a drive to try to find some left-wing judge to stop Trump from getting the TSA agents paid? Because God. It was illegally, quote unquote, paying them. So you ask yourself, how insane are these people?
I mean, another example is in Minnesota, Minneapolis, which is probably the largest showing. I mean, don't they care about the fact that the state and the nation has been ripped off by criminals who happen to be majority Somali, who are stealing money from poor people, stealing money from social programs that are supposed to go to helping mothers who want to have their children in daycare, helping elderly people who want to have hospice, helping, people who are trying to get a leg up in this society, people who are trying to participate in programs that you would think they support. Whether we support them or not is another question, but the fact is that they are there and they're getting funded. And then you have criminals who are coming along and sucking away the money and sending it overseas. Don't they care about that? Instead, they're like, we're going to protect Somalis. Like this is a racial thing. I mean, are these people that stupid? I mean, this goes to what
Well,
Jonathan.
yeah, they're that stupid because if you look through everything in your life through a Marxist prism of oppressor and victim, then that's how it's going to come out. All right. And the victim must be the Somalis because you see, they're black people. And the oppressor must be you because you're white, even if they're the ones doing the stealing, because it's justified, you see, for them to steal because they've been hurt by whitey somehow with that huge population of white people in Somalia, I guess. And they came here to escape that. It's completely irrational. But as we've said so many times with Ethel Rosenberg and the Model UN, that's it. Right. It's like a religion. Leftism.
In sociology, it's called toxic empathy.
Yeah.
They're empathetic for the complete wrong person. There's nothing sympathetic about some Somali mafia figure siphoning off, suitcases filled with cash and sending it over to some terrorists in Africa. There's nothing whatsoever that's helpful based on their own alleged principles of trying to help people. These are not disadvantaged people. They're making millions of dollars a year, and Nick Shirley has done a great job of showing their parking lot where they have Rolls Royces and they're pulling up with great cars. And what about the poor schmuck on the street who's hustling in a blue collar job, trying to put his kids through college, trying to make a living? The person, maybe he's white, I guess, so he's therefore an oppressor. I mean, this whole thing, this is a product of, critical race theory, of course, and how pervasive it's become. My new book, Red Pilled Social Theory, gets into that and what the colleges are teaching on that. But are these people either brainwashed or brain dead? But Minneapolis was really ablaze, and you had Walt, who was about as corrupt as they come. The reason Kamala Harris obviously picked him was because the day or two after she chose him, he was able to cough up $30 million for her campaign, which, of course, who knows what happened to that. But where did he get that money? Obviously, he got it. He must have had some interface with the Somalis.
Well, there were 2 points in his favor. He had all this illicit money, and he's the only person in the U.S. who's dumber than her. And I think that was it.
Yeah, but here they are, and they're just trudging along. And we may want to laugh about it, we may want to joke about it, but these people and the people who are behind them, which is this huge internationally based financial behemoth, people like Soros and the guy over at LinkedIn, what's his name?
Reid Hoffman is Netflix.
Reid Hoffman, yep.
And the LinkedIn guy, I always get him confused.
And Stryer, who's running, I think, for governor of California, and some of these other billionaire figures, all of whom are interacting probably to varying degrees with Jeffrey Epstein and with this whole international rotten order that is, I would say at its core, quite satanic. that they mean business and that they're very dangerous people and that they are intent and driven on taking power. They don't care. I mean, this, you and I may like snicker over the fact that the No Kings rally was a flop, which it was. But, I watched the news last night, the normie news, right, with Tom Yamas, and they covered it like it was this huge success. And they showed videos of Bruce Springsteen, in Minneapolis, and look at all the turnout, and it was exciting. And even though none of that was true, but that's what their playbook is, and they don't care. They're going to push the thing, and they're going to push it until they win the midterm. And if they win the midterm, President Trump will probably be impeached if they get both houses, certainly. And even if they don't, probably be impeached pretty quickly and probably put in prison pretty quickly.
I don't think they're going to win because they, we've always talked about this 25 or so percent of hardcore idiots. You're never going to change. But it's just, what have the Democrats done? What is their platform besides
how
Trump?
far are they going to go to? I mean, we know what happened in 2020. That information continues to come out. We've been talking about it for 5 years, but I think it's now been completely confirmed that 700,000 ballots showed up in Pennsylvania out of nowhere, 300,000 in Atlanta in Folsom County, 300,000 in Michigan, 300,000 in Maricopa. What they're going to do, they'll do it again. They may not do that. Who knows what they'll pull off? I mean, I don't know about that, but they're not going to. I think they're going to do what they have to do. They don't care. I mean,
well, they can try,
but they're lying about the No Kings, which is a nothing thing.
Well, okay, but remember this: if they were so intent in defeating Trump in 2024, why did they put up Kamala Harris? I'll tell you why. There's not a single person in the DNC that thought she was a good candidate.
Right.
But they just couldn't help themselves because
they couldn't keep Biden on after that horrible debate. They had lied about him all those years. They kept him in the basement. He did no interviews other than maybe with Cardi B. And he couldn't string two sentences together. But I don't know why they actually let him do that debate. That's something that is strange. It's one of those moments.
It's because, I hate to break this to you, they're not very smart. They have one playbook and that's it. And Biden was their guy and they believed their own BS, He's fine. He's great. He's fully competent.
They must have known that he was incompetence mentis. I mean, and to put him up there like that and to do it and I remember watching that debate. I mean, the debate went on late. It was like 9:30 at night. Yeah. I mean, Biden was sunsetting at that point. He could barely shuffle out there. And then when he started to ramble incoherently, it was obviously over. They could not cover that up. We all knew this. Everyone in the country knew it. It was seen for years when he would
But again, you're asking yourself, why did they do that? Because they believed their own crap, because they thought they're so damn smart that they could overcome this. And then they got defeated by, we have to put up this candidate because she's a black female.
Right. Well, at that point, they realized that they could not, the gig was up. I mean, the cat was completely out of the bag. Even liberals.
Why couldn't they pick somebody else?
Well, I remember watching the commentators, all the left-wing, mainstream, normie commentators. They couldn't say anything. They were pulling the hair out. It was so bad. So they had to pick somebody, and she's the vice president. Who else? They don't have much of a bench.
That's the other thing.
Who are they going to get? I mean, I think now they're obviously going to put in Newsom, seems to me.
Oh, he's terrible. But, I mean, he can't speak. He's very stupid. You think Biden came off bad at a debate? Where do you see Newsom?
I don't know. I have not seen him debate, but I think that he looks to me
But you
like,
haven't seen him debate because he can't.
yeah, but then again, neither could Obama. Obama needed to have a teleprompter to address a kindergarten. I mean, when he was off the cuff, and I think they're thinking that Newsom is going to be another Obama, right? He looks good. He's telegenic. He's empty. He's kind of, you know, glib a little bit. I mean, I just think that that's the
Well,
kind of
yeah, but even if you believe that, the problem is he's got a terrible record to run on. I should know. I live in his
Oh, I
state.
agree. I mean, it's a disaster, but he keeps winning in California, doesn't he? Even if it's fraud. I mean, he seems to be able to pull it off, and I just think that he's the kind of candidate that they get. I mean, they get this sort of tabula rasa, an empty suit.
Oh, that's right. Let them put him up, and we'll see how it works because he
And
he's
they
got nothing. He's
they'll
a
put
complete,
everything behind him,
complete
including
empty suit. I don't know what he thinks he believes in. Um, I mean, look at the whole bench. Take the biggest states. Who do you have? Can you name a single individual of
no, well, that's
senator or
it.
governor?
Maybe Shapiro, but Shapiro's problem is that he's a Jew. I mean,
Well, his problem is he's a Jew and he's now
too
trying to swing the harder left.
yeah, but he's too pro-Israel for the Democrats, who obviously are anti-Israel at this point, clearly.
Well,
And
no, they're anti-Semitic. Let's be more honest.
right. I mean, I think that even Newsom now, he's coming out and saying, "Oh, Israel's an apartheid state, and
Yeah.
genocide," and that's not enough for people, for the AOCs and them. They're like, "Oh no, no, he's pro-Israel." I don't think that's going to work for them because I think that even though Israel's taken a lot of hits and it's not, I'm not on board with everything that they're up to. Nevertheless, I still think that the majority of Americans support Israel, including Democrats.
Well, what happened? The Times and other news media was trying to make a huge deal of the fact that they shut down Palm Sunday in Jerusalem at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
Right.
They played for security reasons, and that may have been true, but they did open it up for the rest of Holy Week.
Well, I think that, I mean, I had this already with some of the anti-Semites on Twitter, including E. Michael Jones. Look at the Jews hate Catholics. I mean, right? I mean, no, because they also shut down the Kotel, the Western Wall, and they shut down El Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount, mainly because one of E. Michael Jones' beloved Ayatollah's missiles landed in the garden right near the Holy Sepulchre. And Israel doesn't want to see a situation where that could end up, hitting that church while there were people.
Well, that was the problem. All the usual suspects reacted, and a guy who I used to follow, but I don't anymore. I don't know why these guys are all named Michael, by the way. Michael Matt of the conservative Catholic newspaper, The Wanderer, suddenly got on this anti-Israel bandwagon, and it just doesn't work unless he decided that his followers were of that bent. He pulled the St. Francis thing. I don't know, but the thing is, the Democrats have nobody to run. Obama was a better candidate than Newsom because, again, he was perfect, right? He was telegenic. He was an effeminate black guy, so he didn't seem threatening.
Yeah. And he couldn't even be sold to conservatives, which he was, because nobody really knew who he was or what he was about. And he would make these innocuous statements, blah, blah, blah. I mean, he sounded good. He had a good smile. And, I think that's what they're hoping with Newsom. Even though
Newsom has too much of a history.
And he's not as good as Obama either. I mean, even in that department. But But anyways,
And by the way, his wife will be a real detriment.
oh, I've seen her. She's a bit shrill, and
Well,
she,
she's shrill. She's also a moron, and you have to
yeah.
keep her locked up somewhere.
Plus, his kids. One of his kids is a big fan of Charlie Kirk. But putting all that aside, I'm
Yeah.
worried about the midterms. Not because I think that Trump could lose, the Republicans could lose it, but because I think they will do who knows what. There'll be some big false flag. There might be some event. I mean, these people don't, they know what they're doing. They play for keeps. Um, I am worried about, obviously, like we all are, the Iran war. We don't know what's going to happen. Um, there's now 50,000 American troops that are there. It's very frightening. I mean, I don't want to see another Iraq. Trump, it does run against what Trump stands for. I don't know what the answer to it is, but I hope
Well,
that,
what he's doing now, apparently they're negotiating with an alternative government.
okay,
And I think what is going to happen here is the people in power in Iran are going to burn themselves out. I mean, even today, there were headlines of massacres and whatnot. And you know what? You can't keep killing your own people and expect popular support.
I don't think they have popular support. I think that I heard Steve Turley describe this. He's a good sociological thinker. He says that they have what's called the mosaic philosophy, in that they were prepared for what would happen. They were prepared for the killing off of all of their top people, their Ayatollah, their military people, and they were even prepared for killing off the second tier of their people, which has happened. Because
Yeah.
what they have is 36 separate units, like kind of counties, I guess you might call them, or 36 states, each of which has its own government, its own group of people that control things locally, each of which can operate autonomously. It's kind of like they were prepared to function without a head. It's kind of classic communism in a way, right? That they have an organization. It goes back to the anarchist movement of Michael Bakunin in the mid 19th century, that they would be prepared to operate. This is how Antifa operates. They can operate in a city or in an area without any central authority. They just have their plans, and they've got their instructions in advance, and they can function, and they could do so for years. And that their strategy then is to survive and continue functioning on the local level, and sort of run the clock down on Trump, dribble the proverbial basketball in the final minutes of the game. And then, of course, once Trump's out of office, they figure they'll end up with President Kamala Harris, and then they can have their nuclear bomb and blow up the world. That's their strategy. I think that is their strategy.
No, I understand. I mean, the reason the contrast would be the reason the Soviet Union fell uh, is that they weren't willing to massacre their own people. Bottom line, okay, because it's a Christian mentality.
That's right.
The other one is a Muslim mentality, and they're happy to kill everybody. Let's be honest.
Yeah,
Put it on the table.
it is a cult of death.
Yeah.
And if somebody is killed, that's martyrdom. It's all because of the Islamic way. And the Islamic way, of course, is something that's not well defined. It depends on who's doing the definition. And in their case, it's these ayatollahs. I mean, people should ask themselves. They say, "Oh well, Israel and the Western democracies. Why are we attacking Iran?" Well, the question I have for them in the counter is, why does Iran not only going breakneck speed to get nuclear bombs, but they've built this incredible underground infrastructure where they've literally hollowed out mountains and put in supersonic missiles and technologies, and it seems like they've put, I mean, look, I mean, Hamas did the same thing in Gaza. To an extent, Hezbollah has done it in southern Lebanon, where they've built this huge, all this energy going into these massive underground structures. And it's to engage in an aggressive war, not only against Israel, but against the West.
Right.
Israel, in spite of all the anti Jewish conspiracy theories, they don't have any interest in fighting Iran. They don't have any designs on Iran. They don't want to conquer Iran. They don't want to conquer their neighbors. They want to have peace with their neighbors. They will hold out the olive branch of peace. And they've achieved peace to an extent with Egypt and Jordan. And everything is, reasonably peaceful. That's not that they necessarily are best buddies, but it's possible that they can coexist peacefully with Israel. But Iran is decided on engaging in an aggressive stance, and it's completely contrary to anything historic. They've got no beef with Israel, but yet they want to destroy Israel, and that's why they're firing missiles at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. In fact, they're aiming at that church because they want to create an incident which was going to trigger war. They're aiming. They're firing missiles at even their allies, like Oman and Qatar. These are countries that had been allied with Iran.
Well, you know what? They're going to run out of munitions. They're going to run out of money. And the difficulty that Trump has is that he has to, control how aggressive he gets. Yeah, and knowing that they're going to try to run out the clock, and knowing you have a lot of fair weather patriots here.
Oh, that's right. And they're depending, just like Hamas depended on the radical left wing fifth column in the United States and in the Western countries, and their financiers, people like the Soroses of the world and the international banking elites who are not pro-West, not pro-Israel, in spite of the anti-Semites who think they are, with some exceptions, and who are going to agitate on the campuses. That's what they're hoping for. They're going to run down the clock, try to get people to fly flags about how they're being oppressed. The United States is engaging in aggressive war and all of that crap. And I think that that's their strategy. Now, whether they can pull it off, it remains to be seen. But I just hope that to counter that, we don't have the loss of American lives in our military.
Well, I think you're going to be very careful about that because certainly the way Iraq went down, they don't want to repeat.
I mean, Iraq, that was a disaster. However, Iraq today is better than it was under Saddam Hussein.
Oh, yeah.
And also in Lebanon, the Lebanese government has not only banned Hezbollah, and now that Hezbollah has been cut off from Iran, they're in trouble, and Israel's taking them out piece by piece. But the hope is that once Israel kind of puts them on their heels, they will negotiate with Lebanon to leave the southern country, part of the country, as long as the Lebanese army is able to step into the vacuum, and that Lebanon will then normalize relationship with Israel. That's what I think is kind of in the cards. There's secret negotiations, or not so secret, between Israel and Lebanon, and that could be a positive development. Israel doesn't want to stay in southern Lebanon. They're there because Hezbollah has set up tens of thousands of missiles, and those missiles are aiming at Israel and Israeli citizens. Any sovereign nation has a right to, people always say, does Israel, they insist they have a right to exist. They don't have a right to exist. They've earned their existence by protecting or trying to protect the lives and the property of their citizens. Like any nation, no nation has a right to exist. You have to earn that right. We earned that right in this country with the American Revolution, right? 6 very difficult years to.
But even, be honest, even amongst the left in this country, you're going to constantly hear about how we slaughtered the Indians. And
Right.
never mind, they were doing a great job killing each other before we
That's
got here.
the Indians made some very bad decisions about their alliances. They allied with the British and the losing side, both in the American Revolution and in the War of 1812. Now, I'm not saying that America's record is perfect, but while the Trail of Tears was going on, which is not good, there was this kind of phenomena throughout the world. I mean, where populations were being shifted around. It's not unique to the United States. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not apologizing for it, but at the same time, they're focused. The United States benefits from we were a big society based on slavery and all of that, and that we have to pay reparations. Well, I don't know if do you follow Matt Walsh at all?
On occasion, yeah.
Yeah, I mean he's okay. I mean he's doing a whole series on the history of slavery and of black white relations, and he notes, and he has the statistics to back it, that the United States actually imported only 3% of slaves from Africa. And that the way they know that is because very careful records were kept. There were manifests that were kept on those boats. So we pretty well know, I mean, fairly closely, the percentage. The majority of slaves went to Brazil, probably almost 50%. And the majority of the rest of them went to the Caribbean. They went to like Jamaica and Cuba and, Haiti, which is a majority black country. And, the United States really wasn't like a major slave country. And that 12 of the American states abolished slavery, including Massachusetts, even before the end of the American Revolution. In fact, I'm quite proud to note that Massachusetts, my own state, was one of the first governments in world history to abolish slavery. And that was before the end of the American Revolution. Of course, the reason they did it wasn't because the state wanted to do it. The reason they did it was because there were a couple of good lawyers, particularly Theodore Weld and several others, who represented slaves in this state and who demanded their freedom. And it became so expensive as a result of these cases that the state decided it wasn't worth it any longer.
Yeah, well, Massachusetts banned slavery before the British did.
That's right. As did several other states. I think several New England states, New York. Actually, I think New York was a little late to the game, but there were several other states, Pennsylvania. The British abolished it in the 1830s due to the efforts of people like William Wilberforce and others. But that was already later. So, I'm just saying that they're going to craft history the way they want because they're anti-American. They're anti-West.
Well, it's anti-American and it's ignorant in that you go back in general 100, 200, 300 years, life was terrible compared to what we have today. So anything you talk about, anything is going to be worse.
Exactly. So, put in the context of the time.
But people have a very narrow focus, because you read your first American history book and you learn about the Sons of Liberty and so on. All right. Well, the health even of the richest people compared to the poorest people today was terrible. Terrible.
Course. Wasn't advances in sanitation, medicine, all those things. It's just life has improved. I mean, you have to look at things in the context of the times in which they took place. I mean, it's just rather than, you see what they were doing in 1776. No, it's, as any reasonable sociologist or anthropologist or historian can open that lens. You have to look at what were the conditions at the time. Humanity had only reached a level of knowledge that we've continued to grow in, that it was available at that time. although I'll say that the American people at that time, in a way, were more educated than they are now. In that, I mean, I think about
Well,
my
that's another conversation.
well, I think about my dear friend, the late great Dr. Samuel L. Blumenfeld, who noted that Americans were much more literate back then, and that you can know that from letters and correspondences that average Americans, working people, not rich people, people, indentured servants. I mean, they would communicate with family members through these letters that are still preserved and that are very literate and that are quite well put together. Um, and there were pamphlets were huge. I mean, the American Revolution was largely inspired by Thomas Paine's pamphlet Common Sense, which was a huge seller, flew around the colonies like wildfire. Great pamphlet, by the way. I recommend people read it. It's very good. Just a short treatise. I put it in my most recent book. But I'm just saying that the American people were much more aware of more sophisticated ideas, average people, than they are now. Now it's sort of what my dear friend Sam Blumenfeld called dumbed down America. It's a very deliberate, very conscious effort to reduce the cognitive and functioning and spiritual ability of average Americans. And that's the
Well,
result.
one thing I never asked you about him, when he was coming out with all these opinions, how did his fellow educators react?
Quite negatively.
Ha!
I mean, Sam was a pariah in his lifetime. Um, his book on the NEA, Trojan Horse in American Education, was, I mean, there was real efforts to have him censored
Yeah.
and attacked. Of course, he was a member of the John Birch Society, which added to that. And the John Birch Society, by the way, they're nothing more than a group of people who care about literature and books. They're intellectuals. They read a lot. That's all they do. Now, they may not be always right about everything, but for the most part, they're good patriots who care about studying history and the course of events. I've always found, and I've interviewed them many times over the years. I've spoken at some of their events, and I find them. I don't always agree. There's some. I mean, I actually personally knew Jack McManus, the president of the Birch Society. He lived here in Boston. Yeah, he passed away recently. Great man. But and he came up and did my show occasionally, and we didn't agree on certain things. I mean, but very sincere, very well read, very intellectual. Wrote a great book about currency and gold standard, and they had their heart in the right place, and I think they've made a big difference in
Well, they're
America.
still around, of course.
They're still around. I don't know how relevant they are now, but I mean, I'm not all that impressed, frankly, with what I see now. I don't think that their new leadership is wanting. Let's just put it that way. But they fought the good fight certainly under Robert Welsh, and they I think they made a difference in terms of turning the tide against literal communism in this country.
Yeah.
Them and several other groups, and I think that's largely why they were denounced, particularly by William F. Buckley and others who are sort of more establishment conservatives. And a lot of the stuff.
Well, I'll tell you what, that could be a discussion for another day.
Yes.
I defy anyone to tell me exactly why William Buckley is considered conservative, but
Yeah, a bit of an opportunist, I think. Kind of. He was good on TV, though. Man, he knew how to rip an argument. I mean, you don't get the people. There's no one like that today. Him and Rush Limbaugh, even though, again,
well, he was, Buckley had this erudite thing, but there were other conservative thinkers.
Oh yeah,
that I felt were better.
I agree. I mean, I think I like James Burnham a lot better. Fall of Civilization, and
Yeah.
he also did a great expose on the communists in government called Web of Deception. Great book, had a big influence on me. So yeah, there were definitely some better thinkers. I would even say Alfred Regnery was a great thinker. He did a very
Yeah.
good book on conservatism. He was on my show. I should have him back. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's some great thinkers out there, and I think these people, Whittaker Chambers was a great man. These people have made a big difference, even if they were suppressed. Um, the word did get around, and they were able to have an impact, even if they're not given credit, even if they're not mentioned. They're not. These are not the people that are going to get awards, right? You're not going to have their shelves aren't going to be groaning under the weight of another stupid award that they get. They're unsung,
Yeah.
but they're heroic. A lot of people like that. Um, anyways, I could think of a few others, but we could maybe do a whole show on that. Anyway, just looking forward. I mean, when on the one hand, we like to sneer at how crazy and stupid the No Kings people are. On the other hand, it is a warning, even if they're just a handful of nuts, which they are, that it's an attempt to overthrow the government. It's what it is. And, you know, it's using these same useful idiots that Lenin talked about to do that. These old ladies in blue hair who
Well,
are,
maybe you could look at it though as kind of a last gasp. By the same token, you mentioned Tom Yamas, and nobody's watching this anymore except that demographic.
yeah, that is who watches it.
So
And
at some point, the 80-year-olds are becoming 90-year-olds and 100-year-olds, and that's done.
I think so. I like to think it's the last gasp of a dying old regime. And I don't know. Recently, I briefly turned into MSNBC, what they now call MS Now.
Yes, now.
And it's gotten more delusional and crazier than ever. I mean,
Well, that was the reason they did it. Now they could just go full retard.
it's like absolute crazy blue stocking nutcake stuff. I don't know how people, and people watch this stuff and they become radicalized in a way that's not even dangerous. It's just sad, that they're just, I mean, there's something, again, to go back to Jonathan Albert, the psychotherapist, who I think had some very good things to say, that their whole life has been centered around politics to the point where they don't feel, like their hatred of Trump is their faith. It's the very center of their beings. They can't enjoy anything in their own life. They can't enjoy their children and grandchildren.
Well, that's right. Trump ruined their whole life.
And they've said this.
Yeah.
I'm so upset. I'm leaving the country. I can't enjoy a vacation. I can't enjoy, going to have a great dinner somewhere. Nothing is good because of Trump. Everything gets down to that. And it's really, in a way, on the one hand, it's sickening and it's pathetic. On the other hand, it makes me wonder if we don't have some kind of a mass psychosis in this country. I mean, there was.
I think we do, but it's that same 20 to 25%. And one of the problems with mass media is that they never learn anything. Never. From day one, okay? They were worried about putting sound into movies. Then they were worried about color. Then they were worried about television. And in the music industry, it was the same thing.
Right.
Music was going to die because of recording. Did you know that? Because now people won't be as apt to go to the symphony or see live music.
Right. I remember
Hundreds of millions of people. So they never get it. And what is accelerating the demise of media now is they think they have a solution. And the one who's really gone completely nuts, as an example of this, is Megyn Kelly.
Really?
Now she'll do anything for clicks. Anything. She's gotten completely gross, calling Mark Levin all these scatological names.
That's sad.
It,
She and Candace Owens.
well, Candace Owens was the one that really started it, but I don't know. Candace Owens was always a phony. Megyn Kelly wasn't always a phony. But there you go.
Kind of gone off the deep end. I can't. I've watched her a few times. It's not my thing. It's too kind of like girlish. I don't know. It's not my deal. But you know, at Tucker Carlson, of course, I think it's gone off the deep end, and I like him. But I've heard him get into some stuff that's just, it's not really who he was.
I don't know. I tell you, before he went nuts, I would watch him.
Yeah.
I thought, you know, what
good on Fox.
This guy? He just seemed to. There was something very insincere about his presentations all the time, and he'd go to that insane giggle, and you think, like, what the hell, you know?
You know, my only dealings with him was many, many years ago. I was at the what was it, Talkers Magazine conference in New York.
Oh.
And it was then where I met Hannity and Combs. They were doing this show. And I remember Tucker Carlson, actually was sitting at lunch at a table next to Tucker Carlson and these kind of big wig executives. And they were giving him the third degree. They were really grilling him. And he was like really yapping a lot and trying to be impressive. And, you know, maybe he was overreacting to their questioning. But I remember like, wow, I mean, what a motor mouth. I mean, it was like, whoo, rambling, la, 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 la. But at the same time, I could tell that he was going places. I mean, he was, you know, completely like schmoozing those people, and he knew what he was doing. There's a couple of another guy that was at that convention was Glenn Beck. And Glenn Beck at that time was just kind of coming out and coming big. And you could tell he was going places. You could just, he had like an aura. I like him. He was like really ready to roll, you know, and he knew exactly what he was doing. Great broadcaster, right on the money. He's like the guy who does, you know, like commentary about, I don't know, he's like a mainstream, you know, pseudo-conservative, trying to think of his name. Does like, he likes to talk about, you know, people who are cheap with charities, and, you know, the liberals, I forget his name, but he was very phony. Anyways, I'll think of it maybe next time. And he was making a big deal about over the fact that he was an Orthodox Jew, so he couldn't speak into a microphone because it was Shabbos. You know, give me a break. You know, it's like this kind of posturing. You know. Anyway, I wish I could think of his name. I'll get to it. Anyway,
is he still around?
Who?
Is he still around?
Oh, yeah. Still around, very limited capacity. So, Mike, what do you have coming up on your?
I was working on a piece that had to do with how do we get to the point that we're at, and I was going to go into a little bit of the issue of universal suffrage, which is interesting.
Okay.
Why we have it, and why we shouldn't have it, frankly. And just trying to keep track of what's going to happen with some of these current events, like how we're going to wind down this Iran war. Should be interesting.
God willing, it'll be over soon. You know, it's just, I keep hearing things that the regime is about to collapse, and then nothing happens. So,
Well,
well,
I think it's a good strategy if he really is trying to put in an alternative government to the extent that it will kind of make void the people that are around in power. But we'll have to see. It's
it'll,
a difficult situation.
yeah,
Been a dictatorship for 47 years.
that's right. And it's not, look, it'll if it's the Trump doctrine. I mean, I think hopefully it'll be like Venezuela in that you're not going to go in and do a regime change like the Bushes used to do. Instead, you're going to leave in place the people that are more indigenous and more generic to the country. You're not going to impose the Pahlavi, regime, which is not good. And Trump's not on board with that, and nor should he be. The guy's like a playboy. But instead, you're going to let the Iranian people settle it out, and it's going to be a regime that'll work with this administration, just like in Venezuela, and that will implement gradual change that's appropriate to that society, which is very limited. It's not a Western society. They're not going to be, we're not going to create nations that are like the United States. That's just not going to happen. These are Eastern mentalities. Israel is an Eastern mentality. It's not the United States. None of these countries are. Only the United States. We're sui generis, and that's something we need to know. Anyways, so Mike, as always, great talking to you.
All right, same here, and we will see you next time.